Hello and welcome to the Your Financial Pharmacist Real Estate Investing Podcast, a show all about empowering pharmacists to achieve financial freedom through real estate investing. I'm Nate Hedrick, and each week, my co-host David Bright and I explore stories from pharmacists all over the country who are achieving their real estate goals while maintaining a meaningful career in pharmacy. Whether you're a first-time investor or a seasoned pro, we're here to provide education and inspiration about the world of real estate. Please note, this podcast is intended for educational purposes only and should not be considered financial or investment advice. Hey, David, how's it going?
Hey, good, thanks. How about you, man?
I am quite well, sir. I'm doing quite well.
I know we were talking right before we hit record that this market is just nuts right now. It still is. As we're recording in kind of midsummer here of 2021, we're seeing news like mortgage applications are down. It's people are competing and all these offers over. How's it looking in your market? Are you still seeing that kind of where you're at?
You know, it is still crazy in most areas. I'm starting to see it opening up a little bit. Like I'm almost afraid to say that. My clients are going to be like battering down the doors now. But really, I am seeing, I've seen a couple of listings recently with price decreases, which I haven't seen in months. I'm just seeing more inventory, at least in our market locally, which is good. I'm hoping that this is at least a flattening of this kind of craziness, which would be nice.
Yeah, and I've seen a little bit of that too, where I think that there's some people that are testing the market with some really high list prices and then kind of backing back down. And I think that speaks to the value of having a really good agent that is really in tune with what's going on in that market to make sure that both on the buying side and on the selling side, the strategy is right, because it feels like it's changing week to week right now. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a cool story that came up this week with our concierge service. We had a client that I worked with. They closed back in March, and their brother was actually looking for a house. And so they referred their brother to us as well. And they just got under contract this week, which is really cool. So it's nice to see just, having a good agent in your corner can really start to make the difference, even when it's crazy times like it is right now.
Yeah. And one of the things with the crazy time too is, I know we talk a lot about how it's hard to buy a property right now, which I think a lot of folks that are getting more and more interested in investing are looking at buying their first, their second, more properties like that. But I think there's also a group that has one or two or more rental properties right now. They're seeing some pretty substantial appreciation in this market too. And today's guest talks about that quite a bit. We get into a little discussion of, do you sell? Do you use a home equity line of credit or a HELOC? Do you do a cash out mortgage? Like different strategies of how to leverage that market appreciation too.
Yep. So today we interview Young Park, and Young was actually back on the YFP main show on episode 182. Talked a little bit about BRRRR investing there and out-of-state investing, and we wanted to bring him back on to kind of really dive in deep on some of that. And one of the things that, as soon as I saw him write this quote and kind of put this information out there, I was like, this is the guy, right? We got to talk to him. He had sent me an email. We were emailing back and forth about a couple of things. And he had said, knowledge is only potential power. Without taking action, it's just information. And I thought that's exactly it, right? Like this is how you take information and you turn it into potential and actually take action with that, which I thought was really cool. So I'm really happy to have Young on the show today. And he goes through some great examples of what the BRRRR strategy can do.
Yeah, and he's an inspiring guy when it comes to that taking action and turning that information into something, because he definitely dove in the deep end trying to do these rehabs from hours away, and he's got great tips about how to do that and some of the communication that is necessary, whether you're investing thousands of miles away or whether you're investing in your same town. There's a lot of good tips about communication and contracts and things that can help that be much more successful.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I liked a lot about this discussion today was just what the BRRRR can do for you in terms of recycling or repurposing or reusing the money that you've already built up. Because investing can be challenging to start, but it's even more challenging to keep going, especially if you've sunk a lot of costs or sunk a lot of your capital into a property or two. And so he talks a lot about the advantages the BRRRR brings. And I think that really comes forward in this episode.
He also points to, when you talk about that repeating, he also points to kind of the long-term vision of where this can go as you see appreciation over time, as that mortgage is paid down, how you can accumulate many properties and at some point sell those and turn that into something else. So he's got great vision for how to turn this into a much bigger picture than just a single rental property here or there.
Absolutely. All right. Well, with that, we'll take you guys right to the episode. Hope you enjoy. Hey, Young, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me here, Nate and David. Nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, great to have you back. I know you were on YFP main show back on episode 182, and we reached out as part of developing this new podcast and knew we wanted to have you on to talk all about what you've been up to on the real estate side of the house. So we appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me back again. I had a lot of fun with Tim last time, so it's good to be back here.
Good, good. Well, we'll start with your pharmacy story for those that might not have heard it. So what are you up to in pharmacy and how did you get here?
Sure. So I'm currently serving as an ambulatory care clinical pharmacist at the VA healthcare system here in Honolulu, Hawaii. I moved here after completing my PGY1 residency at the VA healthcare system in Reno, Nevada. And for my PharmD, I went to Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine in Georgia. So I started learning about financial independence and investing after I moved to Hawaii. And after learning about different investment vehicles, at least to me, real estate investing was not the easiest, but it was the best strategy. My big whys are to be financially free so that I can spend more time with my family and loved ones and to be able to provide for my parents financially. Currently, I'm investing in cash flowing rental properties from out of state using the BRRRR strategy.
Yeah, that's great. And that's exactly what I want to talk about today is that BRRRR strategy. I know we've mentioned it on the show before. David and I have some experience with BRRRRing properties, but I think diving into that a little bit more is really what our intention is today. So start off, I guess, just broadly, as broadly as you can for us, Young, define to the audience what a BRRRR property is or what BRRRR investing actually entails.
Sure. To keep it simple, BRRRR is an acronym for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat.
Mm-hmm.
To break it down a little further, we're buying a distressed property, and the property itself can be distressed, or the owner can be distressed and is motivated to sell. And you're purchasing these properties at a significantly under market value, and then we rehab the property so that we're bringing it back to the market value and in a livable condition. And then we rent out the property to provide a new home for a tenant. And then we refinance, and more specifically, a cash out refinance from a bank or a lender so that we're pulling all the invested cash out. And the bank will actually send out an appraisal on the rehab property, and they typically provide 70 to 75% of the newly appraised value.
Mm-hmm.
And the last step, of course, is to repeat, which is to repeat the whole process all over again.
So it's sort of like flipping, right? I think a lot of people can understand flipping. We've all seen shows on TV about flipping houses. It's sort of like flipping, but when you get to that point where you're ready to sell, instead of doing that, you actually are putting a tenant in there and turning it into a long-term rental, and then going to the bank and basically saying, okay, how much is this worth to you guys? But give me an appraisal. And then they actually will cut you a check for 75, 70% of that appraised value that they determine, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's like a perfect mixture of buy and hold and flipping. You're
Yep.
flipping so that you're causing the forced appreciation of the property value, and then instead of selling it, where you're probably going to make a lot of cash, but you're getting rid of that asset.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, you're keeping that asset, you're getting that monthly cash flow, and you just repeat that process.
So as you're describing this, and I think that we have a lot of people listening that are probably thinking about that first rental property or have a rental property already, and they're thinking like, so you mean that not just like the work to jump in to a long-term rental, but now I got to do all this work to flip a house. I got to buy it with cash, figure that out. I got to refinance it. Like that feels like a lot more moving parts, which makes it feel riskier. So can you talk a little bit about the risk and the benefit with the BRRRR method versus just saving up to 25% down payment and buying a rental property that way?
All right, I'll do my best to keep it simple. So with the traditional method, you're pretty much capped out by the amount of cash you have on hand, and of course that can be solved if you have a money partner. But usually, you like you said, David, you're saving up for that 25% down payment for a property, and then you wait until you save up another 25%. And depending on your income and the cost of the property, it might take a while. However, using the BRRRR method, you're really creating the forced appreciation that I mentioned earlier through the rehab, And if it's done correctly, you can pull out all of your invested cash out. If I were to give an example, if I can,
Sure.
you purchase a distressed property for $50,000 in a neighborhood where the houses are worth 100,000, and then you rehab it using about $25,000, and then now you're all in for about 75,000, right?
Mhm.
But the new appraisal value should be $100,000 in that specific neighborhood. So now you go to the bank and request for a cash out refinance. And if they were to give you a 75% cash out refinance of the newly appraised property, theoretically, you're going to get your $75,000 back in your pocket. Now you're going to repeat the process all over again. And now you're not capped with your money.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's such great, simple numbers that you brought there, Young. And I think it shows the power of that recyclability, right? That last R of repeat becomes possible because you're pulling all that value out of that property. So that's an awesome example.
I don't want to take the credit for that because that number's been given out in so many different podcasts and YouTube videos and bigger pockets. So, but yeah, I'll take credit for this.
There you go. But and to make this even crazier, right? So David talked about the complexity of this, but to make it even crazier, you're doing all this from out of state, right? So you're talking about being in Hawaii right now, but you don't invest in Hawaii, right? And we can talk about the reasons behind that, but you're investing out of state.
Correct. Yeah, it's really hard to invest here because it's not a cash flowing market. The
Hmm.
median housing prices here, oh man, I think it's about $940,000 here.
Wow.
And yeah, so it's definitely a flipping market or maybe short term rental, but not for long term cash flowing market.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so you invest in Kansas City, Missouri, right?
Correct.
And so how does that change the approach? I mean, does it affect the refinancing? Does it affect the deal acquisition? I mean, we can get into more of the details about the actual deal finding here in a minute, but I mean, do you feel like it's harder because you're out of state or easier because you can be more hands off? What does that do for you as an advantage or disadvantage?
There's definitely pros and cons. Just to mention some pros, to me at least, I'm actually glad we're 5 time zones away because I can get started early in the morning
Hmm.
and not all the actions happening while I'm at work. So I can jump on, like I start at maybe 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. If I need to make phone calls, I do that. And to be honest, a lot of communications are done through the emails or text, and they usually know that I'm out of state. So they accommodate if I needed anything. They're usually really good about that. Of course, the cons would be it's super far away. We're probably 3,000 to 4,000 miles away, and it'll be difficult. I can't really touch and feel the property,
Hmm.
but you mentioned it earlier. I can be more hands off, systemize more. I can depend on my team more, so that I'm doing what I'm good at, which is to analyze properties and find them and put offers on them.
Yeah, and I'm really impressed by that because it's taken me a while to do some of that myself. Like I still invest within an hour of where I live. I'm training myself to buy properties without walking them personally first by leveraging the team more, even though they're an hour away. But I'm trying to do that more and more. So I'm impressed that you're able to do that kind of right out of the gates. So what's been the hardest part about that? How did you help to build trust in the team, and what gave you enough confidence to take the plunge and go in that direction?
All right, I'll start with the challenging part. So, definitely the most challenging part is buying from a distance, and it's hard to purchase off-market properties that doesn't have an inspection period. So, the way I usually go about it is, I'm getting these photos or videos that are listed, and I come up with the best estimated rehab cost, and then I make my offer on it. And once I go under contract, that's when I send in a contractor to get the actual estimated bids. But if I don't have that contingency period, that makes it very difficult unless I'm very sure if it's a very light work or the spread or the margin is so big that I can, I'll be okay with, having some unknowns, I should say. So that'll be the challenging part. So building the team and building trust was actually not that it wasn't that hard for me. And the reason is because I had my mentor CJ and his wife Jazz, they've been investing in the Kansas City market for several years from Hawaii. So they've already paved the road for us. They had at one point they had over 80 plus properties. So they already have the contractor in place. They have a couple of property managers that they like, maybe several realtors that they like, and the lenders. everyone was already set there. So because I had that network through my mentor, I was able to find a contractor who's been vetted and they've been working together for years. So I knew I had confidence in him. Property managers, I interviewed a couple of them that were referred to me, and then I picked the one that I liked. Same for the lenders. I spoke with someone, and then I got a rate that I was happy with, and they were really quick. They're used to making these investment loans, so I didn't have to explain anything. And all of these, you kind of it started out with referrals, and just through my connections with my mentor.
Yeah, I think it can be a huge help and a huge springboard when there's already someone there that you trust and they can make that handoff to someone else, and kind of trust through that person helps you to be a little more confident in doing that. Part of your explanation too is that you're looking for deals that have a little bit of margin to them so that if something goes wrong, because in a big rehab like this, something always goes wrong, right? But so when that thing goes wrong, it doesn't sink you. I think it might be helpful for people. I like the simple numbers that you gave earlier. Can you walk us through another set of examples of some real life numbers so that people can see how that really looks in your market?
Sure. So I can actually share this same property that I shared on the previous podcast, but maybe with a little kicker at the end. So, yeah, so this one was a single family house, 3 bedroom, 2 bath. And I found this property through a wholesaler on Craigslist. And I always get a kick out of this because it almost sounds like a joke, but it's really not. I actually did find it. And I was able to negotiate down the price from 65,000 to 53,000. And I had a 5-day closing on this one, so I had to send the contractor in quick. And I used my mentor's trusted contractor to get the estimated rehab, and the numbers made sense to me at that time. So we closed on the property the same week.
Wow.
And the rehab cost was about 40,000 was the estimated, but it ended up being about 42,000. So my total money invested on this property was $95,000. And after placing a tenant there and hitting the 6 month seasoning period, and the seasoning period is basically the period required by, I believe it's by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac,
Mm-hmm.
who require you to season the property for about 6 months before allowing a cash out refinance. So you're just playing by the rules. So I went to the bank after the 6 months of seasoning and requested a cash out refinance. And the appraisal came back at 142,000, and at 75%, I was able to cash out about $106,000 minus some closing costs.
Wow.
So basically I pulled all the money that was initially invested, the 95,000. I put some extra money in my pocket, and I was able to hold on to that property, which has about like $35,000 in equity. So, and it's cash flowing. So what more can I ask for, right?
Wow.
But I actually wanted to mention another kicker, and it's a smaller update that I had recently. So, given the recent surge in the housing market, I decided to open up a HELOC on that investment property so that I can tap into my equity.
Hmm.
And I got super lucky because the new appraisal came back at $225,000.
Wow.
Yeah, that is crazy. And they allow 80% LTV or loan to value. So with that money, I actually wiped off my mortgage, and I'm going to use the other money to continue to invest in real estate.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so there's a few pieces in there because you talked about the safety, and I know that so many of our pharmacist listeners are very safety focused. And they want to make sure that they've got backup plans and all that kind of stuff. What you had in here, knowing that this property was going to appraise much higher than what you had into it based on all your estimates, knowing that you had some wiggle room in there and going a little over budget on your rehab from 40 to 42,000 definitely doesn't seem like it ruined anything in this case, right? Like sometimes going over budget feels like the end of the world and a terrible deal, but no, that was fine. You had enough margin in there for that to be more than fine. The $142,000 appraisal was fantastic, and doing that allowed you to pull out more money than you had invested, which also I'm assuming helped you to build an emergency fund then for this property, so that if the day after that mortgage happened, the furnace went out and the main sewer line went out or something like that, you'd still be fine because you had some cushion there as well. And then this new appraisal at 225 is kind of amazing, and speaks to some of the market forces we're experiencing right now. So that's amazing.
Yeah, I actually went to Vegas and just put all that money on black. Just kidding. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna touch on that money. Yeah, that's actually for saving up for capex and maintenance and repairs. Yeah.
What I love about that too is, again, we talk a lot about being risk averse and trying to build in cushion and safety nets and things like that. And with that cash out refinance, you're still leaving 25% of the value of that house in the deal. It's not like you're pulling all this money out and now you're just hoping for the best. And if it doesn't cash flow, I'm going to owe this money. Like, you still have a cushion in there that if there is a drop in the market or a decrease in value, and again, you had a tremendous increase in value, but if there had been a decline, you still have got 25% of that value to ride on, which is one of the things I like most about the BRRRR, is that it feels very risk averse because you're keeping a lot of skin in that game.
Yeah, and as Nate's bringing up the multiple exit strategies and all these safety things, I'm curious too. You're all into this property for 95,000. You get an appraisal that says it's worth 225,000. Was there a moment in there where you were tempted to sell, cash out, take the profit, and go invest it elsewhere into either more properties or stick it in a mattress or like something? But like, just seeing how much that grew, was there ever a temptation to be like, man, I'm out?
Actually, no, I was not tempted at all. And the reason is because I think I actually got super lucky on the appraisal. If I were to sell this, I don't think it's going to sell for 225. So to me, this is I got lucky. I'm going to keep that.
Take the
And
win.
that's my opportunity. So I'm going to tap into that money. And, with at $225,000 at 80% LTV, I believe it's $180,000.
That's great.
Yeah, so with that, I can actually invest in the property, and I think I can actually make tap into more money by keeping the HELOC rather than selling it.
Love that. That's a great example. I appreciate you diving into that because, like you said, the example numbers help, but to see somebody actually doing it and how that progresses over time, that's the real power there. So that's awesome. So one of the things we've been talking about is, as we've been working through this, I feel like there's three main aspects to a proper BRRRR that I want to break down, and I think that comes down to buying well, right? Finding a deal, rehabbing effectively. You want to make sure that your actual rehab is on, at least close to budget and not overdoing it. And then that last piece is the appraisal. So let's walk through each one of those, if you don't mind, and kind of break those down so we can understand maybe how someone else might be able to set themselves up for success. So let's start with the buying, deal finding. So how do you find good deals? How do you evaluate them? Walk us through that initial process of what you do when you're looking for that buying part.
All the deals are market specific, so you have to know your market really well. So let's say in Kansas City, I like certain pockets of the Kansas City market, not everywhere. So let's say I'm just gonna throw out some names out there like Raytown, Grandview, maybe north of the river. Those are like my bread and butter. Those are the places I like. Those are markets that are appreciating and is renting pretty well still. So you have to know your market really well, and you want to come up with the ARV, which is the after repair value. So you have to be pretty confident with those numbers. And to be confident with those numbers, you just have to keep doing it and practice and analyze. So when I'm purchasing it or analyzing it, I'm actually finding these properties from both on or off markets through the MLS or the wholesalers and figuring out the ARV first. And then I figure out the estimated rehab, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. And then I figure out what my purchase price should be. And I always have some kind of meat on the bone so that I have some margin for cushion. So, as we mentioned earlier, in rehabs, there could always be something that will come up. There will always be something. So, you should always prepare for that. If it doesn't come up, that's more power to you. That's more meat on the bone. So that's how I'm finding these properties and analyzing and coming up with my purchase price.
I know on the purchasing side, you mentioned wholesalers. I know a lot of wholesalers often will require a cash purchase. If you're buying on the MLS, sometimes cash is necessary. Sometimes you can buy with a mortgage. I know that there are people out there that will do the BRRRR strategy by buying with a mortgage first and then doing the rehab and then still doing the cash out. Are you using cash exclusively or you looked at other lending options as well?
I actually use cash to purchase these, and because I don't want to have that financing contingency, which is more attractive to the sellers. And when you're buying it cash with a quick close, you're more likely to get discounts. And also, if you're just putting a regular down payment, you're going to look like every other buyers out there, and you're not going to stand out. And also you're actually gonna have to close twice, right? You have to close on the purchase and you have to close again on the refinance. And it's just not as efficient as if you were to do it with cash.
Yeah, and if you have the cash, I agree. You can save a lot on the fees and the paperwork and a lot of that just by making a cash purchase. And at the price point you're describing, it's certainly a lot more achievable than in some other markets. So I think that makes really good sense for what you're doing. I have like a slew of questions now about contractors and how you work with contractors because that feels like just an absolutely crucial step of the BRRRR process here is that you need to be able to do a rehab, oftentimes a pretty substantial rehab, and have that not go off the rails. So, can we just start with how do you find good contractors and how do you manage them from a distance when you can't walk over to the property and shake a hand and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so referrals are it's your best friend. You got to have good referrals and also have solid agreement in writing and have understanding with each other what the expectations are upfront. So, this happens a lot in just everyday life actually. People have different expectations and expect the other person to do certain way, but you never told them, you never relay that information to them, and that's how you get miscommunications, and then that leads to bad taste in mouth, and just going downhill from there. So yeah, you got to have good referrals, maybe even have two, maybe three people walking the property so that you're getting the bids and you're able to kind of compete the prices. And on the contract, I saw this from the Burr book, or might be Long Distance Real Estate Investing by David Green.
Mhm.
So you want to have these agreements where you're paying them in draws. So you're not going to give all the money up front. You're going to give partial money up front so that they can get the project started. And once they complete certain amount that are specified in our agreement, then I send in the next draw and they complete the next phase of the rehab. And then I send the next draw and so forth. And before I send in my final payment, I make sure the property manager walks the whole property and they check off all the things that were supposed to be fixed up and making sure the property is rent ready. And once I get the okay, that's when I pay off the last payment.
That's really smart.
So there's a lot in there that I like about the clear communication that has to be there because I agree that that clarity just has to be there. And I know folks I've worked with have used pictures that they've grabbed offline, like put together something on Pinterest or something about all the different finishes that they want, or they'll even send item numbers from like a Lowe's or Home Depot or something of I want this vanity and these cabinets and these counters. They're getting super specific with some of that in order to bring that clarity. What ways are you trying to make your goals really clear to those contractors?
For that, it's kind of easy because I can just refer back to a property on Zillow. So I would refer back to a property that was done by my mentor because that's the typical nothing fancy rental property rehab. So I just send them a link like, hey, check this link on Zillow. This is the type of finishes that I would like. I want the interior painting to be in this color scheme. I want the cabinets to be in this color scheme with the like backsplash and the tub, etc. So just give them that example.
Yeah, and I think that's a great approach, especially once you've developed that track record of the team. And it sounds like through your mentor, you kind of have that as well, where you can say, "Oh, we're going to do this like the Marquette Street house or something like that," and then everybody just knows, like, "Oh yeah, we did that kitchen, that bathroom, cool, let's do that again." So getting that really clear, I think, is helpful. And you also mentioned the draws. So how are you verifying the work? Are you getting photos or videos, or are you doing a FaceTime walkthrough, or how's all that work?
I usually do photos because of the time difference. We list out the specific work that's supposed to be finished or completed in order to receive the second draw. So if it says demo, interior paint, put up the drywall, etc., then after I see all the photos, then I send in the next draw and so on and so forth.
And I know that no one really likes to talk about this, but there's always things that go wrong when there's construction, right? And sometimes those are just things about the house where it's just no one expected this, but we open up a wall and there's a problem. And other times it has to do with things not working out with a specific contractor. So have you run into any of those and kind of what do you do when things don't go well?
Yeah, I actually ran into one very recently. So things don't always work out the way you want it to, right? And life happens. So recently I had to separate with a contractor a few months ago, and that was really frustrating. And I'm sure no one wants to go to the legal route, but if it's going to cost a lot of money, or if they costed a lot of money, or they didn't really do much, but took a lot of your money, then it might be worth pursuing. But just taking that legal route itself can be very costly. So you just have to weigh the pros and cons of that. And for my case, we agree that the contractor will reimburse certain amount of money back. And through this year, I took away a lot of lessons. And it's really important to have, the vetted contractors, or again, as I mentioned earlier, get multiple bids from referred contractors. So if it's the property itself that, something unexpected comes up, then that's where you always want to have contingency. Whenever you're getting estimated rehab and you have your budget, I usually put additional 10 to 15% on top of it, and anticipating that something will probably go wrong, and it usually does. So just having that and having that contingency up front will give you more peace of mind. And when things come up, yeah, you make some addendum to your contract or your agreement. So when you open up a wall and if you see something like mold, or if there's like pest or anything like that, then yeah, there will be additional cost. And that will have to come from you. It's not really fair to put it on the contractor. And that, as an investor, that's some of the risks that you have to take. And that's why you always should have your contingency.
Yeah, I have flashbacks to opening up a wall and finding termites, and yeah, those are terrible experiences. But it's also really helpful when you have an experienced contractor that can be like, "Oh, okay, seen this before. This is what we do. We call this person. We handle it." And it's just so helpful when you've got people there that are good and that can take it the next step when those kind of things happen, because they do. And it sounds like you're doing a really good job of making sure that you've got those buffer funds in place for those kind of hiccups that come.
David, that reminds me of our first BRRRR that we did together up in Michigan, and we got all the garbage out of that house, and then the contractor was like, "Oh boy, yeah, good thing we set aside that other extra $8,000 because we're gonna need it. Here we go." So,
Oh yeah.
Yikes.
yeah, we mentioned the where to find the deals. We mentioned the rehab now, and so that last step is the appraisal, and it's a pretty important one because as someone who has been on the unlucky side, right? You mentioned you recently got pretty lucky. As someone who's been on the other side of that, what are things that you can do to set things up to maximize that appraisal or to really put things in the best possible light?
Sure. And I actually want to refer back to the first step, buying right.
Hmm.
So you always have to buy right. So you want to start with instant equity, instant meat on the bone, right? So you want to purchase it right. You want to get it rehabbed correctly. You don't want to over rehab it. You want to make sure you're getting rehab so that you're getting good average or median value of the properties in that neighborhood. And another tip actually for this is to create an appraisal packet, which I learned from an investor friend of mine, and shout out to Daniel. So we can create an appraisal packet that has the before and after photos and list of items that were updated and some of the examples of the recent comps in that area. So the important thing here is to reach out to the appraiser and ask, don't force it, don't just send it to him. You want to ask him or her to see if it's okay for us to send this appraisal packet. I've only done it once, and he didn't decline it, so I sent it to him. I don't know if it helped or not, but it shows you, good comps in that area that have been recently fixed, and it shows you, how the transformation of the property. It shows you the things that were recently updated that are brand new. So I think those things can definitely help you maximize your appraisal. For some reason, if it doesn't come back the way you want it, you can always send out another appraiser out of your pocket, but it might be worth it.
Yeah, I've again speaking from experience in this area, I've actually had to do that before to bring out a second appraiser, and the value changed by I think it was over 10%. I mean, it was a significant bump that
Nice.
first appraiser basically missed on. But you're right. I think setting up that packet, you're framing things for that appraiser so that when they take a look at the house, they're in the right reference point, right? It's not just walking into a house blindly. They know that you put a bunch of work in, so that when they're looking at it, they're taking a different tact. So I think that it makes a lot of sense, and I really like that tip. So for those of you about to get ready for an appraisal or about for a cash out, definitely take that tip from Young and roll with it.
So one of the things I just love about the BRRRR strategy too is that repeat step, that as you do that cash out refi, you're hopefully getting out close to, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but still hopefully close to what you've got into the property, meaning that you've got your cash back and you can do this process again and again and again. So I'm really curious what the next 5 years or even more looks like for you. You're looking at doing, I'm going to do one of these every 6 months so that I can keep cashing out, repeating, and over 5 years, I want to get 10 more properties, or what's this look like for you?
Yeah, that's a good question because as you guys have experienced firsthand, the recent market, it's making it really difficult to burr. There's not much meat on the bone anymore. So I think it'll be a good idea to pivot if you need to. So what I'm doing right now, actually, I just got under a contract on another property last week, and I'm actually doing more of a hybrid burr. And when I say hybrid burr, it's more like hybrid between turnkey and a BRRRR. So I'm buying a property with an existing tenant in it, but I'm buying it and they're paying under market rent. So I'm trying to get these property or purchase these properties at an under market value. But up front, I'm not going to really have any big expenses, right? It's going to cash flow from day one. And I don't need any major rehabs unless there are some safety concerns. Then I'll address that right up front, but I'll delay all the or defer all the rehabs on the back end when the tenant leaves the property. So that's what I'm doing right now. And if I were to, fast forward for the next 5 years of investing, I think I would like to continue to, purchase these single family houses. And the reason why I do that is I'm not actually trying to make a ton of money or a ton of cash flow on these single family houses because you actually don't make a ton of single cash flow on these properties. But what I'm doing instead is trying to plant these seeds or these single family houses and let them all appreciate over time. And I would like to offload these properties and go up into different asset classes like multifamily or even commercial properties. So that's my, I guess, more of a long-term goal.
I like that a lot. There's a couple things in there. One is that you are reacting to the changing market and pivoting accordingly. That it's not like, okay, I did this one thing one time and I'm just going to put the blinders on and do it for forever. There's something great about specializing in a market like you're doing, where you've really narrowed it down to neighborhoods and you've gotten good at estimating values and things like that. That's really helpful. But also then recognizing when slight deviations need to take place. And it sounds like what this strategy is you talked earlier about you're looking for distressed properties that are under market value. And one of those elements of being distressed can just be having a tenant in there that's a long-term tenant that is way below market value. And so oftentimes people don't want to buy those properties for full price because if there's a long-term lease in place, depending on the state, you may have that tenant for a long time paying a very low amount. So it sounds like it's just a different way of finding distress that's a little creative. So I really like that. Are there any other things that you're looking for to still try to make things happen in this market?
I think I'll continue to burr as much as I can. And to me, I don't always go for the home runs. That's a unicorn in this market, to be honest with you. So as long as I'm making some kind of margin, my goal is to continue to again plant seeds. I want to obtain or get accumulate more properties so that over time they're all going to accumulate or appreciate in value, and I'm able to jump on to the next step or catapult into the next category. Yeah, I'm okay with doing the burrs, doing the hybrid burrs. So yeah, I think that's what it's going to look like.
I love it. I love that you've got a vision for that future too. So that's excellent. So with that, I think Young, I'd love to jump over to our final infusion questions. These are three questions that we ask every guest on our show. The very first one is, what's one tangible strategy that you use to make sure that your investing works hand in hand with your career as a pharmacist?
You have to trust your team members and delegate tasks. Don't try to micromanage them. Let them do what they're good at. Also, while you're a W-2 employee, and if you are, then you're in good hands because you want to get as many Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loans as possible because that's the cheapest loans you're going to get.
Great advice.
I like it. Next question. What's one resource that's been most helpful to you in your real estate journey, whether it's a book, podcast, person, author, website, whatever that would be?
Sure, I'm going to choose two books, and neither of them are Rich Dad or Poor Dad. So my two books that I mentioned earlier are actually Long Distance Real Estate Investing and the BRRRR book by David Green, who is one of the co-hosts of Bigger Pockets podcast.
Mhm.
And these are really not mindset books, but it's more applicable. They give you more action steps. Like they would give you a template to email template to write to a lender or property manager or realtor. So these are more actionable steps. So I really enjoy these books.
That's great. And again, appreciate the not Rich Dad Poor Dad plug. We need some of those. That's good.
You're welcome.
And our third question is, what's one piece of advice that you'd give to a pharmacist that's contemplating a start in real estate investing?
Yeah, so I think we all fear the unknown or uncertain. And to overcome that fear, we should first educate ourselves by grabbing a book, listen to podcasts, watch videos, join YFP real estate Facebook group, right?
Good plug.
And you start networking. Yeah, you start networking with other investors because you may meet your mentor who may show you the ropes on how to get started. So, those people, they've experienced it firsthand of the things that you might be afraid of. So why don't you, don't reinvent the wheel. Just do what they've been doing. So educate yourself and go outside and go network.
It's an awesome point. I mean, none of us learned how to be pharmacists by ourselves, right? We didn't just sit down in a corner. It's involving ourselves with other people that are already doing it, already practicing. So that's a great allegory for how you can take your next steps in real estate investing. That's awesome. So Young, we really appreciate this. Again, a wealth of knowledge, and we really are excited to see where you go next. Before we let you go, where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, and my handle is young underscore letter J underscore park.
Perfect. We'll put that in the show notes. It's awesome. Well, Young, as always, really appreciate you being here. And again, I'm sure we'll have you back in the future at some point. And if you guys are looking to connect with Young, either reach out on Instagram or, again, I know you're active in our YFP Real Estate Investing Facebook group. So that's another place to check everybody out. So again, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for joining us for the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast. If you liked what you heard on today's episode, please leave us a review and subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. If you have a question, know someone who would make a good guest for the show, or want to connect with Nate and David, head over to yfprealestate.com or join the growing YFP Real Estate Investing Facebook group. See you next time.